Jane is afraid.
Disclaimer. This content is based on real events surrounding the murder of Datuk Sosilawati Lawiyah and 3 others. All facts related to the case, including forensic evidence, police investigations, and legal proceedings, are derived from verified sources. However, this content is written from the perspective of a close friend of Sosilawati, incorporating personal experiences, emotions, and reflections. Additionally, sections of this content include stories of paranormal experiences reported by individuals connected to the case. Readers are encouraged to interpret these accounts as they see fit. 1. Remembering Sosilawati, the woman behind the name. Datuk Sosilawati Lawiyah was more than just a successful entrepreneur. She was a mother, a friend, and an inspiration to many. Before her tragic death, she built a name for herself in the beauty and cosmetics industry, becoming a well-respected businesswoman in Malaysia. To those who knew her personally, she was a kind, ambitious, and strong-willed woman. She overcame hardships to achieve success and was always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. Despite her demanding career, she prioritized her children and ensured that they never lacked love and guidance. This section offers a deeper look into Sosilawati's life beyond the media headlines, her struggles, triumphs, and the person she was in the eyes of those who loved her. It is important to remember her for the life she lived, not just for the tragic way she was taken. 2. The disappearance that shook a nation. It started as an ordinary day, but by nightfall, everything had changed. On August 30, 2010, Datuk Sosilawati Lawiyah and 3 of her associates, her driver, financial consultant, and lawyer, left for a business meeting in Banting, Selangor. It was supposed to be a brief discussion regarding a land deal, but they never returned. At first, their absence raised little concern. Sosilawati was a busy woman, constantly moving between business meetings and personal commitments. However, as the hours turned into days with no contact, unease began to settle in. Her children tried calling her phone, but there was no answer. Employees at her company found it strange that she had not responded to any urgent matters. By September 1st, her family and friends were in a state of panic. Reports were made to the police, and a search for the missing individuals began. The media caught wind of the story, and soon, the entire nation was gripped by speculation and concern. Rumors started spreading. Some believed she had been kidnapped, while others feared the worst. No one could have imagined the horrifying truth that would soon come to light. This was not just a missing persons case, it was the beginning of one of Malaysia's most brutal and shocking crimes. 3. A family's worst nightmare. As the days passed with no news of Sosilawati and the 3 men who accompanied her, hope began to wane. Her children, close friends, and business associates were consumed by anxiety, desperately waiting for any sign of her whereabouts. Sosilawati's eldest daughter, who had always looked up to her mother as a pillar of strength, found herself in an unimaginable situation, having to stay strong for her siblings while fearing the worst. The family clung to the possibility that she might still be alive, perhaps held somewhere against her will. But deep inside, an unsettling feeling had already taken root. When the police intensified their investigations, the family knew something was terribly wrong. Officers began questioning Sosilawati's business contacts and tracking her last known movements. It wasn't long before they were led to a secluded farm in Banting, an area that would soon become synonymous with horror. Then came the heartbreaking news. Authorities confirmed that Sosilawati and the 3 men had been murdered in cold blood. Their bodies were burned, and the remains discarded in a river. The brutal nature of the crime left the family shattered, struggling to comprehend the cruelty inflicted upon their loved one. The house that once echoed with laughter and warmth became filled with grief. Sosilawati's children were overwhelmed with sorrow, and her friends struggled to accept the tragic loss. The media coverage only intensified their pain, as every gruesome detail of the case was laid bare for the public to see. The weight of the tragedy was unbearable. The nation mourned, but no one could feel the depth of the loss as much as those who had loved Sosilawati most. All they wanted now was justice. 4. The investigation, tracing the last moments. The disappearance of Datuk Sosilawati Lawiyah and her 3 associates had already become a national concern, but when the police intensified their search, the case took a chilling turn. Investigators worked tirelessly, retracing Sosilawati's final known movements. CCTV footage and phone records confirmed that she had travelled to Banting for a business meeting with a lawyer, N. Pathmanaban. However, What happened after she arrived at his office remained a mystery. The breakthrough came when authorities received a crucial tip-off, one that led them to a remote farm owned by Pathmanaban in Tanjung Sepat, Banting. As police combed through the property, they uncovered disturbing evidence: charred remains, bone fragments, and traces of blood. Forensic experts were called in, and soon, the horrifying truth emerged: the victims had been murdered, burned, and their ashes scattered in a nearby river. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves across the country. Who could commit such a heinous act, and why? The police wasted no time. Their investigation revealed that Pathmanaban, along with several accomplices, had orchestrated the murders. Financial motives appeared to be at the core of the crime, as Sosilawati had allegedly been deceived in a land deal. But why resort to such extreme violence? Interrogations of the suspects revealed the gruesome details. The victims were tortured before being killed, their bodies disposed of in a method meant to erase all traces of evidence. However, the perpetrators underestimated the resilience of forensic science and the determination of law enforcement. The evidence was undeniable, and the suspects had no escape. The hunt for justice had begun. 5. The killers among us. Who were they? As the investigation unfolded, the nation was stunned to learn that the mastermind behind the gruesome murders was a respected lawyer, N. Pathmanaban. To the public, he appeared to be a successful legal professional and businessman, but beneath this facade lay a ruthless killer driven by greed and arrogance. N. Pathmanaban, the mastermind. Pathmanaban was not an ordinary lawyer. He had built a reputation in Banting as a wealthy and influential figure, owning vast lands and businesses. But behind his success, he was involved in fraudulent activities, using his legal knowledge to manipulate land deals and deceive unsuspecting victims. Sosilawati was one of them. She had engaged in a land deal worth millions, but when she realized she had been deceived and demanded her money back, she unknowingly signed her death warrant. Pathmanaban saw her as a threat, one that needed to be eliminated to protect his fraudulent empire. The henchmen, those who carried out the killings. Pathmanaban did not act alone. He had a group of trusted men who carried out his orders without question. These included R. Maton, T. Philayalagan, K. Kathavarayan. These men worked on Pathmanaban's farm and acted as his enforcers. They had been involved in previous crimes, but Sosilawati's murder was their most brutal act yet. Cold and calculated murder. When Sosilawati and her 3 associates arrived in Banting that evening, they were ambushed. They were beaten, tortured, and eventually killed. Their bodies were then burned in a fire so intense that it reduced them to ashes, which were later disposed of in a river to erase all evidence. These men showed no remorse. To them, it was just another job ordered by their powerful boss. But what they did not anticipate was that their crimes would unravel, exposing the darkness behind Pathmanaban's empire. A network of deception and fear. It soon became clear that this was not the first time Pathmanaban and his men had committed such an act. Investigations revealed that several other individuals had gone missing in similar circumstances, all linked to land deals involving Pathmanaban. Some locals had long suspected foul play but were too afraid to speak out. The revelation of these killers living among society, respected, wealthy, and seemingly untouchable, sent chills down the nation's spine. If not for Sosilawati's high profile, would they have ever been caught? How many others had fallen victim to them without justice? The killers had been unmasked, but the battle for justice was far from over. 6. Uncovering the truth, forensics and evidence. With the nation demanding justice, forensic experts played a crucial role in proving the horrifying fate of Datuk Sosilawati Lawia and her 3 associates. Although the perpetrators had attempted to destroy all traces of their crime, science would expose their brutality. The discovery of bone fragments and ashes. At the secluded farm in Banting, forensic teams found charred bone fragments, burnt soil, and traces of human DNA. The extreme heat from the fire had reduced the victims' bodies to ashes, making identification difficult. However, using advanced forensic techniques, investigators were able to confirm that the remains belonged to Sosilawati and her companions. The presence of petrol and fire accelerants indicated that the perpetrators had carefully planned the disposal of the bodies, attempting to erase all evidence. But tiny bone fragments and traces of tooth enamel survived the fire, allowing forensic experts to match them to the victims. Bloodstains in the farmhouse. Despite efforts to clean up the crime scene, forensic luminol tests revealed blood traces on the floor and walls of the farm. Some belonged to the victims, confirming that they had been tortured and killed at the site. The tests also exposed drag marks, suggesting that the bodies were moved before being burned. Mobile phone records, the final clues. Another key piece of evidence came from mobile phone records. Investigators traced the last known locations of Sosilawati and her 3 associates, which placed them near Pathmanaban's farm at the time of their disappearance. More damning was the fact that all 4 victims' phones became inactive at the same time, pointing to a coordinated attack. Even more incriminating was the discovery of burnt phone remnants in the area. The killers had tried to destroy the victims' mobile devices, but forensic teams managed to recover enough data to prove they had been in Banting when they vanished. Eyewitness testimonies. Several witnesses, including farm workers, later revealed suspicious activities on the night of the murders. Some reported hearing screams, while others noticed a large fire burning for hours. One worker even recalled seeing black smoke and a foul smell, which was later confirmed to be from the burning of human remains. The river search, a haunting discovery. Investigators expanded their search to nearby rivers where the ashes were believed to have been dumped. What they found confirmed their worst fears: tiny bone fragments, burnt human tissue, and remnants of personal belongings. The evidence was overwhelming. Science had spoken. Sosilawati and her companions had suffered an unspeakable fate at the hands of men who thought they could cover their crimes, but their arrogance would soon lead them to face justice. 7. The arrests. The walls close in. With mounting forensic evidence and eyewitness testimonies, the police knew they had their suspects. The carefully constructed world of Pathmanaban and his henchmen was beginning to crumble, and it was only a matter of time before they were brought to justice. The raid at Pathmanaban's farm. On September 9, 2010, police launched a full-scale raid on the farm in Banting. Officers swarmed the property, combing every inch for evidence. They detained multiple individuals, including Pathmanaban and his 3 farm workers, R.Maton, T. Philayalagan, and K. Kathavarayan. During initial questioning, the suspects denied any involvement. Pathmanaban, a trained lawyer, attempted to use his legal knowledge to outmaneuver the police. He insisted he had nothing to do with the disappearance of Sosilawati and her associates. But the evidence told a different story: confessions and incriminating statements. The turning point came when some farm workers, fearful for their lives, started talking. They revealed chilling details about what had happened that fateful night. Some admitted to hearing screams, others spoke of large bonfires that lasted for hours. One witness even recounted seeing a group of men disposing of ashes in the river. Under pressure, one of the suspects cracked and provided critical information that aligned with forensic findings. The puzzle was complete. The police now had not only physical evidence but also insider testimony linking Pathmanaban and his men to the brutal murders. The court of public opinion. As the news of the arrests spread, the nation reacted with shock and anger. How could a man of Pathmanaban's standing orchestrate such a barbaric crime? Many questioned how many other victims had suffered similar fates without anyone realizing it. Meanwhile, Sosilawati's family and friends, though devastated, finally saw a glimmer of hope. The wheels of justice were turning, and the killers would be held accountable. The beginning of a long legal battle. With Pathmanaban and his men in custody, the next step was to bring them to trial. But as Malaysia would soon learn, this would be one of the most complex and highly publicized cases in the country's history. The arrests were only the beginning. What followed was a courtroom battle that exposed the dark depths of greed, deception, and cruelty behind the murders. 8. The trial, a fight for justice. As the case moved to court, the nation watched in anticipation. The brutal nature of the murders, the high-profile victims, and the shocking involvement of a respected lawyer made this one of Malaysia's most sensational trials. The prosecution was determined to prove that Pathmanaban and his 3 farmhands, R.Maton, T. Philayalagan, and K. Kathavarayan, had orchestrated and carried out the horrific killings. The prosecution's case, a mountain of evidence. The prosecution built its case on forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and mobile phone records. They argued that Pathmanaban had financial motives, fearing that Sosilawati would expose his fraudulent land dealings. His farmhands, acting on his orders, had ambushed, tortured, and ultimately murdered the victims before disposing of their remains. Among the most damning evidence presented in court: forensic findings of charred human bones and burnt teeth at the farm, blood traces detected in the house, confirming violent deaths, eyewitness accounts from workers who had seen and heard suspicious activities on the night of the murders, phone records placing Sosilawati and her associates at the farm, after which their phones went silent. The defense's strategy: denial and doubt. Pathmanaban, being a lawyer himself, fought aggressively to discredit the prosecution's case. His defense team argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there were no direct witnesses to the actual murders. He maintained that he had no involvement in the killings and that his workers had acted independently. The defense tried to create doubt, questioning the validity of the forensic findings and suggesting that the farm was being used by other unknown individuals. However, the overwhelming weight of the prosecution's evidence made these arguments difficult to sustain. The emotional testimonies, voices from the courtroom. The trial also saw heart-wrenching testimonies from Sosilawati's family and the families of the other victims. Her daughter tearfully described the agony of waiting for her mother to return home, only to learn of her horrific fate. Friends and colleagues painted a picture of a strong, determined woman whose life was cut short by greed and cruelty. The police officers involved in the case testified about the gruesome discoveries at the farm, detailing the horrifying nature of the killings. Even seasoned investigators admitted that this was one of the most disturbing cases they had ever encountered. The verdict: justice delivered. After months of hearings, the moment of truth arrived. The court found N. Pathmanaban and his 3 accomplices guilty of murder. They were sentenced to death by hanging, a verdict that was met with relief from the victims' families and the public. The judgment was clear: no one, regardless of status or wealth, was above the law. The 4 men had committed an unspeakable crime, and they would now pay the ultimate price. The aftermath: a nation's reflection. While justice was served, the case left deep scars on the country. It raised concerns about corruption, abuse of power, and the hidden crimes of the wealthy. Many wondered how long Pathmanaban had been getting away with his crimes and whether there were other victims whose families never got closure. For Sosilawati's loved ones, the verdict brought a measure of peace, but the pain of losing her would never truly fade. She had been a fighter, a woman who built an empire through sheer determination only to fall victim to those who saw her as a threat. The trial had ended, but the echoes of this tragedy would remain in Malaysia's history forever. 9. Hauntings of Banting, the paranormal aftermath. Even after the trial concluded and the murderers were sentenced, an eerie shadow continued to linger over Banting. Those who visited the crime scene, including police officers, investigators, and locals, began to report strange and unsettling experiences. Whispers spread that the spirits of Sosilawati Lawiyah and her companions had never truly left the farm of death, a place of restless spirits. The farm where the murders took place became infamous. Despite attempts to return it to normal use, workers refused to stay after sunset. They spoke of whispers in the wind, shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, and a sudden drop in temperature at night. Some visitors claimed to hear a woman's voice crying out for help, only to find themselves standing alone in the eerie silence. Others reported hearing the faint sound of burning, as if the flames that once consumed the victims were still smoldering in the night. Policemen's encounters, fearless officers, frightening nights. Several police officers who had been involved in the investigation spoke about terrifying experiences while working on the case. One officer, who had been stationed near the farm during evidence collection, claimed that his patrol car stalled mysteriously at the entrance. As he tried to restart the engine, he heard knocking on the car window, but no one was there. When he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw a figure in white standing behind the car, but as soon as he turned around, the figure was gone. Another officer recounted how his radio would crackle with static at odd hours, and sometimes, a woman's voice would whisper unintelligibly through the speaker. Some officers even refused to conduct night patrols in the area, fearing that something unnatural lurked in the darkness. The River of Ashes, disturbances by the water. The river where the killers dumped the victims' ashes also became a source of chilling stories. Fishermen and villagers nearby spoke of strange lights floating over the water at night. Some reported hearing soft cries echoing from the riverbanks. A few even claimed that they had seen shadows moving just beneath the surface, as if something or someone was trying to emerge. A fisherman who had unknowingly stepped into the water to untangle his net one evening felt a cold hand grab his ankle. Panicked, he scrambled back to shore, only to find nothing there. He refused to return to the river after sunset. Sosilawati's home, a mother's presence. While much of the paranormal focus was on the crime scene, Sosilawati's family home was also said to have its share of eerie occurrences. Her children and close friends reported feeling her presence in the house, especially in her favorite rooms. One of her daughters recalled waking up in the middle of the night to the scent of Sosilawati's perfume lingering in the air, despite the bottle remaining untouched since her passing. On some occasions, the sound of soft footsteps could be heard moving along the hallway, as though she was still watching over her family. A former housemaid who had worked for Sosilawati before her tragic death claimed that on certain nights, she would hear someone calling her name in a voice she swore belonged to her late employer. When she turned, the house would be empty. Are the spirits still seeking justice? Many locals believe that the spirits of Sosilawati and her companions remain restless, their violent deaths preventing them from finding peace. Some spiritual practitioners suggested that the brutality of the crime left an energy imprint on the locations, trapping the souls of the victims between worlds. Others believe that the hauntings are not Sosilawati and her friends at all, but rather manifestations of the fear and trauma surrounding the case. Either way, those who have witnessed these paranormal events all agree on one thing: the echoes of that fateful night in Banting have never truly faded. Report: paranormal experience of a former housemaid at the Farm of Death. Witness name withheld for safety reasons. Status: former housemaid of N. Pathmanaban. Incident location: farm owned by N. Pathmanaban, Banting, Selangor. Date of incident: night of August 30th, 2010. Background of the incident: on the night of August 30th, 2010, 4 individuals, including the late Datuk Sosilawati Lawiyah, were brutally murdered at a farm in Banting. The victims were reportedly beaten, burned, and their ashes dumped into a nearby river. The case involved the main suspect, N. Pathmanaban, a former lawyer, along with several of his workers. A former housemaid who worked at the suspect's residence later appeared in court as a witness and shared the strange and terrifying experiences she encountered on the night of the murder. Report of paranormal experiences: according to the witness's testimony in court, on the night of the murder, she was inside the house of her employer, N. Pathmanaban. She was carrying out her usual household chores when, at around 10 p.m., she suddenly heard the piercing scream of a woman coming from outside, believed to be from the direction of the farm. "I heard a woman screaming. The scream was loud and clear, as if someone was in extreme pain," she told the court. What shocked her the most was that no one else in the house reacted. The other occupants, including her employer, continued their activities as if nothing had happened. They sat in the living room, watching television, completely unbothered. She further stated that after the scream, the atmosphere in the house suddenly became eerie and oppressive. A strange chill filled the air, making her feel uneasy, but she was too afraid to ask questions. The next morning, as she was doing her chores, she noticed a strong burnt smell coming from the direction of the farm. She described it as the scent of burning meat, but no one in the household acknowledged it or seemed concerned. Repeated incidents weeks later. The witness also revealed that in the weeks following the murder, she continued to experience unexplained disturbances while working at the residence. 1. Mysterious footsteps around the house. Late at night, she would hear the sound of footsteps walking outside the house. It sounded as if someone was wandering around the farm, but whenever she looked out, no one was there. 2. Eerie whispers. One night, while washing dishes in the kitchen, she suddenly heard a soft whisper behind her. "Help me, help me." The voice sounded like a woman in distress, but when she turned around, no one was there. 3. The shadowy figure. On another occasion, as she was walking toward her room, she saw a tall, dark shadow move swiftly across the hallway. The figure was too tall to be any of the household members, and it disappeared before she could get a better look. Fearing for her safety and sanity, she finally decided to quit her job and leave the household shortly after the incident. Conclusion: the terrifying experience of this former housemaid adds another layer of mystery and horror to the already gruesome case. Though the case was legally resolved, many questions remain. Is it possible that the spirits of the victims still linger at the site of their tragic deaths? The farm, once a place of daily activity, is now known as the Farm of Death, and many locals believe it is haunted by the restless souls of the victims. This report is just one of many chilling accounts connected to this tragic case. Was the scream that the housemaid heard that night the final cry of Datuk Sosilawati before she was murdered? Or was it simply the product of fear and imagination, influenced by the ominous presence surrounding the place? The mystery remains unsolved to this day.